Netflix and Amazon pulling out. The licensed content that they're ordering is quite limited, and it's only valid for a few big guys that they used to work with before. But for the newcomers and smaller producers, there is no chance anymore to be on these platforms. So what people do, they go back to basically what they were doing before the streamers arrived. So the main targeted market is in Nigeria. As you said before, Jacques, we are in Lagos, the biggest content market in Africa for films and series. In Nigeria, there is quite a number of theaters, more than I think it's 150 plus. So it's a good market that is enough for producers to get a ROI. So they target the theaters, having good success there. They have a first ROI, and then they can still go on the web with YouTube and other channels on the web to distribute their content and still improve their ROI on the long term. So that was what was happening before, and they are back to that. It's not all, because there is also a reaction from people creating new streaming platforms that are more local than Netflix and Amazon that obviously are global. So there are more local platforms. I can name two of them in Nigeria again. One is called Kava, started 6 months ago. The other one, Circuits TV, started a year ago, more or less. And they are pretty good, and they are not only addressing Nigeria, because they are addressing all Africa. Circuits, for example, is promoting content from Uganda as well, and you can connect to this platform from wherever in the world. There is no geo restrictions. So the diaspora, wherever they are in the States, in the UK, in Europe, Asia, wherever, they can connect easily. Also, what they did to differentiate, what Netflix and Amazon were doing, which was, I think, not a good strategy, to force people to subscribe on a monthly basis with their credit card. It's not a good business model for Africa. As you know, pay-per-view is a much more easy way to buy content, and people like Circuits, that's what they do. So you can buy a film for less than $1. You can even subscribe for 1 month of local content for $1.50. So they reduce price and they give more flexibility. So there is a new opening on that side. So maybe Serge, or Jacques, I let you drive the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jacques. We have two Jacques today, so don't be confused. So Serge, welcome to the show. You are the new kid on the block here, because everybody, or at least a lot of viewers, know Caroline and Jacques and myself. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself quickly and your company, Okada Media Distribution, what you do, and you can join and answer the same question I had for everybody. What is the status of the African film industry as of today?
All right, thank you so much, and sorry for the delay. I had some technical issues. So Okada Media is we like to call ourselves, because we are doing distribution, but we do more than that. So we like to call ourselves a mini studio, in the sense that we have distribution, we have production as well. We also produce films specifically, even though we also want to venture out into series and all of that. So distribution, production, and then we have exhibition, in the sense that we don't own any cinema chain or anything like that, at least not yet. We'll see in the future. But for now, we have a festival. So every year in France, we are able to also showcase the vibrancy of African cinema in the heart of Paris. So that creates an outlet for filmmakers from Africa to also basically connect with audiences outside of Africa, and also other opportunities. They can meet other distributors, they can meet aggregators, they can just venture out. So that's what we do. We also have a small component, which is talent management, which I think is also an important part that we don't talk about enough, but it's part of the professionalization and the structuration of the sector on the continent. So yeah, so Okada Media, that's what we do in a nutshell. And when it comes to where the African cinema space is today, I think Jacques mentioned quite a few things. There's definitely been a shift over the last couple of years, but some see it as a crisis, but I like to see it as an opportunity. I think it's the Chinese symbol that is the same for crisis and opportunity. So we can decide which side of the coin you want to you want to look at. And I think what Nigeria is doing with those new platforms that are coming up is a good example of that, in the sense that yes, there is a crisis, there is less money, less revenue coming in, but what do we do? And the idea is really to be creative, and so they have come up with new platforms. And I can tell you for free that there's more platforms on their way. I'm also talking with some platforms that are not even out yet, but they are already structuring their business, and there's quite a few platforms that will come out. Of course, I don't think all of them will be alive necessarily in 5 or 10 years. I think there will be another wave of consolidation, because that's just the natural way of how things happen. But some of them will definitely do well, and some are doing well already. Like I think Circuits specifically, which has been there for a bit longer than Canva, for instance, is doing pretty well. I think the big telcos are also entering the fray very soon. So I think it's an exciting space, and it's something that even when in the good days of Netflix and Amazon, I think there was already a concern, at least for some of the most seasoned producers out there, which was you don't want to be in a situation where you are dependent uh, to such an extent on one or two players. So now diversification is the key again, and I think we're in a place where we are, reinventing not the wheel, but reinventing the windowing system and reinventing how we can monetize properly content in Africa.
Interesting. And I remind to everybody, and we already did some live event about that in Africa you have a lot of producers, a little bit everywhere in the continent, but the elephant in the room, the big player, is Nigeria, who is one of the two biggest producers of movie in the world. Nigeria and India are producing more than 2,000 movies a year. So it's a huge market. And and I was in India recently, and it was interesting because India is like self-sufficient. They have their producers, and they have so many languages, like in Africa, but they developed an internal market that is almost, and I would say not almost, is completely self-sufficient. You don't have a lot of Indian movies exported because they stay in India. Now in Africa, it's a little bit different. It's a different situation. And let's talk 2 minutes about the culture, because culture and localization. So how can this help to export the content? I know the Nigerian movie don't export too much. I know, Sergio, are organizing the Nollywood Week in Paris every year, and we'll have the pleasure of speaking at your event next month in Paris. But what is the deal with the exportation, the export of these movies? I don't know who wants to answer this question from a cultural standpoint. How the localization, and we know the localization is more about culture than about dialogue. Um, how can this help the export of the movies? Who wants to answer?
I think I can maybe put a little bit.
Go
I was
ahead.
reading some statistics recently that Africa, on average, we get more content from outside that's localized to African languages than we have of African content localized to other African languages.
Interesting.
So there's and quite significant actually. Um, so it means a lot of Africans are not watching African stories for whatever reason. Um, it could be policy driven, it could be broadcast decisions, who knows? But the reality is, I'm more likely to watch a Mexican telenovela in Kenya and for almost 30 years than I am to watch a Kenyan film every day being broadcast. So there's something a bit off about that. I think many countries have worked on policies to support African content. Our issue isn't even creating. Our issue is we don't get seen. So I know certainly from the Kenyan perspective, we have a lot of films, a lot of documentaries, a lot of content, but we have barely scratched the surface as far as local consumption is concerned. This is broadcast driven, it's policy driven, and the avenues by which creators can show off their work. Okay, let's say I get a YouTube channel. Then what is the next issue in Africa? The next issue is we can't afford data. Only not all of us. Streaming is affected by data connectivity and the cost of data. So there are a lot of infrastructural things beyond localization. But if some of these things are fixed, then we would be able to watch more of the African content within the continent. So a Kenyan film to be localized to Hausa, to Yoruba, to Igbo, to hit the huge Nigerian market. Nigerian content is very popular in Kenya. I'm more likely to see Nigerian content than a Nigerian is to see Kenyan content. So it has traveled for sure on the continent to the point that we even have picked up the nuances, the language, or we know, we speak like Nigerians when we choose to. But that hasn't happened for most other African countries. And I think that localization is an opportunity to help content move within the continent. I think I'm more concerned about it moving within the continent than I am so much on the global, because that's such a small percentage when you consider the numbers. Nigeria is a population of 500 million. So when we're talking about local audiences, Kenya has a population of about maybe 50. So they're 10 times larger population than Kenya. So it's a numbers game, but I think more can be done, should be done about localizing African content and getting it to the people as quickly as we can, so that we understand what's happening culturally, we can follow the trends, so we can tell our stories and share our stories. Yeah.
But that's very interesting. And you were talking about Kenya and Africa, the center of Africa, two main countries. But unlike if you think about America, you have one language, which is English. South America, they all speak Spanish. Um, Africa is a huge continent, but there is a diversity of cultures that probably people don't think about that. We think about Africa as an entity, but Africa is the mosaic of so many different cultures. And maybe Serge or Jacques, do you want to talk 2 seconds about that?
Yeah.
Is it really complicated for these people to communicate? Like Caroline was saying, she doesn't watch Kenyan movies, but she was Nigerian. She watched Nigerian movies. How is it complicated for the people to watch other movies from different parts of Africa? Even if we stick in Africa, we have so many different cultures. How can these people share the content? Who wants to take this one?
So
I can start and let Serge,
okay, all right.
because again, you will give a little bit more depth to what I'm going to say. But Serge and I, obviously, we are pretty focused on the two main languages spoken in Africa, French and English, and the culture are similar, whatever people speak French or English. And the content from Nigeria is well appreciated in Kenya, but is also very well appreciated in French-speaking countries, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Togo, to name a few, Burkina Faso. So what we are seeing with Serge will confirm, is more and more Nigerian content providers are asking us to do French dubbing of their films and series so that they can distribute these in the French-speaking countries. And
Can you remind everybody, because not a lot of people know what the distribution of languages is in Africa. So remind us a little bit, who are the francophone countries and who are the anglophone countries? Basically, you have two languages there.
Yeah, there is a third one which is important as well, but less in terms of the number of the Portuguese that is spoken in
All right.
Angola, Mozambique, the two biggest countries, and a few smaller ones like Cabo Verde. But yeah, basically Western Africa, Central Africa, Congo speaking French, Eastern Africa speaking English, more down south speaking English. So to make it simple, half and half French, English, and Portuguese, a little bit. So really French is important. There is less production, cinema production. There is, obviously, in Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso is famous for producing, but in quantity, this is less than what we can see from English-speaking countries. So there is a need for both sides, French to export into English-speaking and English-speaking to export. So it's good for us. So now, I mean, because price is always very important. Caroline mentioned the difficulty to pay data. So to pay content as well is a difficulty. So it's important when we do localize content to address this price concern. At Transperfect Media, we are global but local. So being in Lagos, Nigeria, we are doing dubbing, French dubbing from Lagos now at a very affordable price and a very good quality. So this is something. This is a new trend that we are seeing, for people to expand their reach in terms of distribution of content. Serge, I let you continue on that.
Yeah, I think I think I would like to also go back to what Caroline said initially. I mean, one of the reasons there's so much in that question, basically. I think there's obviously like a lot of historical reasons as to why African content is having difficulty to travel even within Africa. Like the colonial heritage and all of that, which is still felt today. But the other point, which is important, is really the policy element. What Caroline was saying about how it's difficult for a Kenyan to watch local content on TV, it's also because local TV stations, the reason why they will buy Mexican or even Philippines content from the Philippines or whatever is because it's cheaper. So there is an element that is very pragmatic, and they can buy those telenovelas from those places for much cheaper. And why is it cheaper? It's because also those content have already circulated. They have already made their money back on their local markets, and then they've already made money back on secondary market. And so then they come to Africa and they're able to dump, quote unquote, their content at a very low price, which obviously a local production cannot compete with. So there's this economic element, and that's where the political element has to come into place. I think it's very important to have policies that defend local content. And when I say local content, I think decision makers should be smart enough to not restrict things to just the national country, but it should have a regional approach or a Pan-African approach. I think that will make a huge difference. Overall, I think there is an appetite for, like, TV viewers want to see themselves on the screen. So if you're in Kenya and you have a chance to watch at the same quality production value, that which is something important as well, something that will be from Ghana and something that will be from Vietnam, I think most people will go for the Ghanaian content. But that Ghanaian content never lands on their station because of what I just mentioned. So there's a lot of structural problems that need to be addressed. And I think when we talk about circulation of African content, we should actually put Nigeria aside, because Nigeria is a bit of an exception. Nigeria is a very big exception based on how much they produce and all of that,
Right.
and so that really gives them leeway to have access to markets, in a way that other African countries do not. But it's tough. Even when you look at just the size of the continent, it's from Botswana to Senegal. There's really not much that people have in common, and
Correct.
so that diversity is something that we need to also put more emphasis on. But again, when we have the means at the TV station, because I think the TV station have to really play their role as well. They have to be more instrumental in empowering producers from across the continent. And so then when there will be more budget, it will be easier to now get into that situation where things get dubbed at an industrial level. I'd like to remind, and I'll finish on that, but one of the most successful telenovela from the African continent was actually from Angola. Back in the early 2010s, there was this series called Windeck. I don't know if some of you remember. They had a very catchy song at the beginning, Windeck, Windeck. Anyway, so it was from Angola, a Portuguese-speaking country, and it was able to cut across Anglophone, Francophone. It was sold beyond Africa as well to the Caribbean. It was sold in Europe. It was a massive success, and I think the reason for that is how they produced that
So
series.
it was localized.
Oh yes, it was dubbed in English. It was dubbed in French. It was dubbed. It was maybe in Arabic as well. It was a huge success, and
Great.
it was from Angola, which is a minority country when you talked about the circulation of content.
So that's lead me to the question. We received two questions from Alfie Larieux, whom I know very well. Hello, Alfie. Thank you for being on the call. So Alfie is asking us, when the African countries are producing children programming, education, etc., is there a need for localization? Is this content localized in other countries, or it looks like it's not a lot localized, and why is that?
I can
Do,
answer that one.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, Let me jump in. Um, we have localized African children's content, and I think um, the most it's a Swahili. Is it Akili and Me? Is that what it's called? Serge. Yeah, it's a Swahili
Yeah, actually,
programming targeted at nursery age children learning alphabet and songs and culture and stuff like that. So
This is
it's
great.
educational material, and we've successfully localized some of their content. So now this is Swahili to some Nigerian languages. Um, we've done other kids' content to other languages as well. So it's not a case of it doesn't happen. I think actually the issue is that not a lot of content is created in Africa that is specific to children. So
Uh-huh.
the ones who are doing it will localize it. For example, Akili and me, we even did two other Kenyan dialects. So going back to the language issue, there are over 2,000 languages in Africa.
Yeah.
Most of us are not just bilingual. I don't know if we're trilingual. I don't know what we are. We speak English, like for me, because I come from an Anglophone, I speak English. That's that's what we use, English and Swahili. And then I have my tribal language. And then depending on where I am, I switch it up and speak whatever sort of local pidgin. So that's a typical African interface, but we learn ABC Anglophone. So through Akili and me, we're learning what would ABC be in Luo. ABC is not ABC in Luo. It's something else. So it does happen, but I think for what I've realized is that actually there's very little content created in Africa that is specific to children. So your child is more likely to learn Johnny Johnny, yes papa, eating sugar, yes papa, the one that little rhyme that's on YouTube, than they are to learn anything that would be what you'd say local.
yeah.
So it's not that it doesn't happen, it does. And then the ones who do it, it's very little, it hasn't yet traveled. But I think the issue is more there's less content created than the fact that it can't be localized. It can be localized, be it educational or otherwise.
Which
We have another question from.
sorry, just to add to
Go ahead.
that,
Go
it,
ahead.
it's a paradox because Africa is the youngest continent. So I think
Yeah, yeah,
the gap there is huge. I think whoever, I mean, in the room, maybe there's some producers in the room who want to focus on content for kids. I think that's the way to go. that's the way to go, honestly. And even us at our level, when we have our festival, Nollywood Week, we have now created a section called Nolly Kids on which is like one part of the festival, which is focusing on that content because, again. Just as Caroline said, the kids cannot just grow up by on listening to Yes Papa or Coco Melon, and they should have the equivalent from their own culture. So it's something. There's a huge gap there, and it's a way for producers to become successful if they want to focus on that.
Great. So for the producers in the audience, that's a trick from our panel. Produce some kids content. Now we have a second question from Alfie that is really interesting. He is explaining that the new African streaming services sell prepaid film access for $1 to $1.50 a month of film, and he's asking if they also partner with mobile phone companies to offer some data for the phone viewers. And it's really interesting because last week I was in Los Angeles for the EGA ConLocon event, and I'm hosting the event. I'm the MC there, and all the panels were focusing on verticals, and I learned so much about verticals, which is the content that is 2 to 4 minutes long, not more than that, and that the kids or the adult now are watching specifically on the phone. So is there a partnership between the phone company and the streaming services in Africa to get more data? Who knows that? Maybe Jacques, you know about that?
I know it's coming, but I don't have an example of already established joint venture between. Do you have one in mind, Serge or Caroline?
Safaricom here has a channel. I think it's called Base or something.
Base
Base,
with a Z.
Base, which has been launched and relaunched and relaunched.
But it's not successful.
um,
It means it's not successful.
I think what their challenge, it's a tricky thing, because these things are all private sector driven, which I have no problem with, to be honest. I know people go on about policy and stuff like that, but I think private sector can fill the gaps. Um, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a content issue, Serge. You can weigh in on this. I don't know if there was a failure to get sufficient content or what the issue is. There's a bottleneck somewhere
Mm,
with base because on paper it looks like the perfect marriage.
yeah.
Um, the telephone, the data, and then we're going to give you, and then we're going to take, stream your content on the phone. But it has not worked.
Yeah.
And I think MTN tried the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
mention MTN actually because MTN
yeah.
is they have tried before. They were focusing on short films or
Mm.
short form content, but now MTN is coming back with MTN TV in the next few weeks or months. I don't know. So this is a scoop for whoever is watching this. But MTN, which is present in like 13 or 15 countries in Africa, will roll out something very very strong when it comes to content. And yes, it would not cost money to the users because they will use the data to watch the film. So let's see what happens there. I think they are quite motivated to really have an impact this time because they've also learned from their mistakes in the past. So yeah, let's see what happens there.
Which leads to the third question from Alfie. It looks like Alfie is having a lot of questions tonight, which is great. Uh, so, what is the ratio between the ticket sales in the digital theaters and the streaming? So, is because we are talking about the American film industry. So you have these two ways: streaming or going to the cinema or the theater. If anybody knows what's going on there approximately? You don't need exact numbers. What
I
is
don't have any data, to be honest. I'd have to AI it. But um, other than Nigeria, this thing called theatrical release and making money at the theaters, I don't think it exists for the rest of us
correct?
because Nigeria is the only place where there's been actual investment not only in theatrical releases, but in actually setting up theaters. They're putting up more theaters. Whereas we, I think in Kenya, I think we don't have more than 10 uh, in the entire country. That's that little. So what you find, I think what I admire most about the Nigerian market is that the private sector just ran with it. They stopped waiting for things to happen and they just created an ecosystem that would consume the content and make them successful. Um, I think the challenge, certainly for me, coming from a producing background in Kenya, is that we kind of wait for someone to tell us, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. So we're not yet there when it comes to trying out different business models. Theatrical release in Kenya is very rare for our content, very, very rare.
Yeah,
And then the cost of doing it is quite high when you think of the rate of return. So
yeah,
I don't have the data, Alfie. What I can say, I think the only market that would be able to give any data would be the Nigerian, as far as Nigerian content making money on theatrical releases. Yes, Serge?
I would like to put a small caveat to that. I think South Africa also has shown, has shown numbers in the past in terms of their box office and what can be done at the box office level. And also in Francophone Africa, even if they also suffer from the same issues that we are talking about for Kenya, some stars, a few of them are able to, when they release a film, they're able to make an impact, not just in Cote d'Ivoire, for instance. Usually they come from Cote d'Ivoire, but they have an impact also in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, and so in several countries in the region. And when you add all of that up, you can get to something like 70,000 tickets sold, 70,000 admission, for instance, which is not nothing, and so then it can end up with some decent revenue for the producers and everything. So in Francophone Africa as well, and Francophone Africa has seen an increase in cinema, in the cinema infrastructure. So that's also something to take note of. But yeah, for East Africa, it's a bit trickier for sure. I've gone to the cinema myself with two films, and it's a struggle. You have to put a lot of money into advertisement, and the culture is not there yet. The culture is more about the premiere. It's like you do a big premiere, and then nothing else happens. And I was telling them, no, I don't want to do a premiere. I want a 2-week run, a 3-week run. I don't want to do a premiere. I don't care
that
about
is funny.
yeah, I don't care about the red carpet. I care about the revenue. But yeah, so there are different scenarios on the continent,
Yeah.
and hopefully in the future, cinema will play a bigger role in the revenue mix.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So, TransPerfect being a tech company, um, let's talk about the infrastructure and the tech innovation that we need in Africa to boost everything. Do you see any infrastructure that is missing? Do you see tech that is missing? What can be done in this continent to boost first the distribution, the infrastructure and the distribution, and after probably the production of content?
I can answer. Gosh, I look like an eager student type, but anyway. Um, the African Export Import Bank, the one that has the interesting acronym like Africa, I can never
It's
pronounce the acronym.
Exim.
The African Export Import Bank launched the African Film Fund last year and committed 1 billion targeting production, post-production, and distribution infrastructure.
That is
So
great.
when we started off, we talked about the infrastructure. The heart is willing, but the infrastructure, there are major infrastructure problems. It's a bit skewed in certain places. So there's definitely a lot to be done in terms of building facilities, um, building studios, building even training models, to be honest, for the workforce that would even be the creators. So in terms of infrastructure, that's what I would say. There's a lot still to be done. Again, private sector, so having access to funding through a bank like this and through the cohorts, the people who will be given the money to give out, is that would help definitely, because I think we need to move away. I know in Kenya I think in East Africa, what we sort of deal with things as freelancers, as single models. So the scaling of businesses that do certain things in order to help reduce costs is not is growing, and it's growing, but I think more will have to be done if we're going to be able to scale on creation and get things out faster, cheaper, and with quality. Yeah.
Interesting. Jacques, do you have something to add? Because you are visiting all these countries. You are
No,
all
but
over the
yeah,
world.
it's true. I mean, even ourselves, Transfer Effect Media, somehow we restrain ourselves on the post-production capabilities that we could install in the countries, because there are not enough people trained enough to use it, and the culture also has to change a bit. As Caroline mentioned, people, for post production, they go with freelancers in one place, sometimes South Africa, one guy in UK, one guy in Kenya. So there is no, like in Europe, France, UK, where central point of post production where you can go and build your film and make it really, at the high level
Well,
that
Europe started earlier. The
yeah, sure.
localization in Europe started in the 30s, so Africa started much later. So you all obviously have a gap there.
But it's coming. I mean, it's taking time, but so there is a need, and that, I mean, we progress. To give you an example, on the sound post production, we are now delivering services. We started 6 months ago, so it's pretty recent. We organized training in Lagos, Nigeria. It was very successful. Now we have requests from producers to rebuild their sound, so they do a kind of a first level sound, but they want to improve with our equipments and expertise. So we work together as a team. So it's coming. It's evolving.
Interesting. We have a good question from Stephen Roger. So Stephen is asking us, do you think Africa, outside of Nigeria, like we pointed out, missed out on the cinema boom? And given the current shift towards online content consumption, is cinema still a worthwhile avenue for producers to invest? Would you invest in a film as a producer? Serge, maybe you can take this one. You are in the heart of the business.
Yeah, I think a lot of time people want to focus on just what's new. Like, I mean, you mentioned verticals, for instance, which is the new kid on the block, and
Yeah,
everybody's running towards that. But I'm of the belief that some of these traditional, structural, foundational avenues still make sense. And I think cinema still makes sense. It's just that we have to get it right on the continent. We have to maybe tweak the model a bit, so that it can actually, meet it can be in line with the aspirations and the demands of the people. But I think at the end of the day, it's still pretty much also the most profitable avenue when you look at the windowing system. Like, you can sell a ticket for, and you don't have to go, necessarily to be $10 or whatever, but you can sell a ticket, let's say, for $5.
3, 4, 5, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have, I don't know, I mean, let me give you also an example of what happens in a place like Uganda, for instance, which doesn't have that many cinemas, less than 10 physical cinemas, a bit more screens because you have multiplexes. But when you look at the infrastructure of these informal cine clubs, they have tens of thousands of those. So now, and some young people have been thinking, okay, how about we upscale these informal, they're called chibanda. How about we transform them into cinemas, local cinemas? Like there will be modest cinemas, but that's a gold mine. So now all of a sudden you have 30,000 cinemas and you can compete with the much bigger and much more mature market. So I think there's a lot of initiatives like that on the continent that are not looking at changing their model, but they are looking at using what they have and maybe upscaling a bit so that they can actually, compete.
sure. So Stephen, you have your answer there. I think it's interesting to note that it's not only in Africa. This is going to be worldwide. I think we are going to see a duality of the content production. So you will have in one hand all these vertical formats made for telephone, and I know I have a 18 years old daughter, and she spends her life on the phone, which is normal for all these kids. And you are going to have big production for the theaters, and I don't know what will happen. We can talk about that, but the gap is going to go probably larger and larger between the uh, vertical production and the cinema production, which is really two completely different businesses. Uh, let's talk about the distribution model. So, Serge, uh, you have a good you live in Paris, if I remember correctly. You know a lot about the French culture, the regulation. So tell us a little bit about the how this market evolved from a French point of view, because you have a strong history there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit how you started in this business.
So I'm actually more in Kenya these days than in France, but
Ah,
but I'm
okay.
between the two.
Because every time I see you, it's in Paris. So
Yes, and I will see you soon again at the festival, hopefully. No, but I mean, I think it goes back to what you said before about France and other countries in Europe starting way before, and so obviously there's a gap, there's a level of sophistication that cannot be replicated on the continent yet. But I always think it's quite interesting to look at these models and also again adapt them to the local realities because copy and paste doesn't work. Like you can't just copy and paste. You have to really use your reality as an engine for your own innovations. I mean, we can talk about hours and hours about the CMC system in France and how it really nurtures emerging voices when it comes to producers, directors, and all of that, because there's money, there are resources available, and there's a system that works really well to redistribute the money that is made at the cinema level, etc. So I think there's a lot that can be learned from these models, but at the same time, in 2026, and the way we live in a digital world, again, the idea would not be to just replicate those models. It would really be to have um, a clear look at the picture that it is, whether it's in Kenya or in Nigeria, South Africa, and all of these countries, to have just a more intentional approach to what's really going on the ground. Yeah.
great, guys. We are 50 minutes into the discussion, and we have another 8 minutes. So I'm going to ask you, each of you, to tell me about the future of Africa. How do you see the future in 2 minutes? Try to be concise. How do you see Africa in the next 5 to 10 years? New model, new partnership, new opportunities. Caroline, you want to start?
All right. How do I see it? I see that as Serge said, we all kind of went. There was like almost a mass online grieving when it was announced that Showmax was closing. There was so many analyses that were thrown out there, but at the same time, it's what he's also said. We have to shift with the times. And I feel very strongly about African solutions to African challenges and African aspirations, as Saj put it. So I think that there are a lot of gaps that private sector can fill. I think there are a lot of opportunities private sector can create. I think there are a lot of strong partnerships and better partnerships because we all have some skin in the game that can be built. So I see it as I'm optimistic. There are a couple of hurdles, but I think as creators we need to stop thinking that only one or two people are going to get us to where we need to get to. It's not. When I started working as a producer, we were filming on 35 millimeter. We didn't know about the World Wide Web and things like this. So when I think of everything that's possible, and all the different avenues. I think we need to do a bit more work. We need to really dig in and do the research and see how many different ways we can be able to get our stories out there. And of course, I'll always push for the localization of content, because from where I sit, it's a value add. I could have made a film 10 years ago. It might be the only film I ever made, but I can certainly make it in over 80 languages plus if I wanted to. So I feel that we there's more that can be done as well, on localizing content, moving it within the region, moving it outside, moving it even to your neighbor who speaks a different language.
Great. Jacques, you want to try to tell us how do you see the future? Which
It's a
is
bit,
important for you because you are the head of sales.
yeah, I mean, I see it bright, obviously. It can only be bright. It's as Serge said before, or Caroline, I don't remember, but I mean, when it's getting different or more difficult at the moment in time, it's an opportunity to rebuild and do things differently and even more successful. The market is resilient in every single country. There is a lot of creation. There is a lot of youth. There is a lot of people schools. I mean, cinema school. We didn't speak about the schools, but there are many, many, many cinema schools in Africa. A lot of people want to create content. So we insisted today more on the channels, distribution, cinema, web, etc. There is, I mean, this will materialize at some point, becoming more mature. But the good thing is that there is a lot of content, and that is worth being localized. That's where we play our role, helping people. Um, there is one word, I'm so surprised, Jacques, we didn't mention it today, which is called AI. AI will play its role as well.
That's another subject all
in
by
a,
itself.
in a good sense, because it's also a good tool, to solve some problems, and on the cost point of view. So let's see what happens, but I'm pretty optimistic.
Great. Thank you, Jacques. Serge, do you want to conclude the discussion? You have
Yeah,
an interesting approach because the Nollywood Week in Paris is pretty successful. So you are the one bringing the African culture in Europe. So is this a strategy, and how can this help the localization and the African business?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a strategy. I think for me, I think for African content to thrive, it has to thrive both in Africa and outside of Africa. It has to be on both sides. That's very important. And also, you have a lot of Africans that are living outside of Africa through the diaspora and everything. Um,
Of course.
I will make a parallel with music. I think when you see the success of African music these days, especially Nigerian and South African with Amapiano, Afrobeats, and all of that. I would like, and I think it's possible for the film industry to replicate, to get there, to get to that level. But it's also important that when the film industry get to that level, it gets to that level with more control, because at the end of the day, those are African artists, but the publishing companies, the labels, and all that are actually not African. And so I think it would be a success if films are able to become mainstream, but also retain the structure behind it, because that's something that has always been lacking. And so I think, yeah, there's a bit of something to emulate, but it's not going to be easy. And especially the second part, the part of retaining the IP and being, the producers, the distributors, and all of that. So it's going to be interesting the next few years. But I think overall we can say that there is more interest globally for African content in general.
Yeah,
And in all forms, shape, and forms, like, from feature films to series to TikTok, everything.
yeah.
So Africa, I think, yes, there is a path to success out there.
And you are saying that the Africans can control a little bit more their content instead of letting everybody else take advantage of it.
I think
Uh,
it's important. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Very
It's important.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, guys, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience. Caroline, thank you so much. Jacques, thank you. And Serge, we welcome you today as the guest of the day. Thank you for being there.
Thank
And
you.
I say thank you to everybody and see you soon in our next live from the boutique event. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Jacques.
Bye.
Thank
Good night.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.